Smoking and the Orthodox Christian, according to St. Nikodemos the Hagiorite, from his books Handbook of Counsel and Spiritual Exercises. These texts are found in a booklet called Smoking and the Orthodox Christian by Constantine Cavarnos. In his prologue to the text, Constantine Cavarnos writes the following: "The problem of smoking has been considered from an integrated Orthodox point of view, which emphasizes the ethico-religious side of the issue, by St. Nikodemos the Hagiorite, who is one of the greatest writers of the Orthodox Church of the post-Byzantine period. St. Nikodemos speaks of smoking in his Handbook of Counsel and Spiritual Exercises. The first work he wrote specifically for his cousin Erotheos, who was a metropolitan, and for this reason he speaks in particular about the relationship of smoking to the clergy. In the Spiritual Exercises, he addresses himself to the pious people in general. I present the pertinent passages from both works so that every Orthodox Christian can see how serious the issue of smoking is, and not just with regard to the health of his body, but also of his soul, and with regard to his responsibilities as a Christian." St. Nikodemos writes, 1. That all clergymen, without exception, should desist from smoking. A. The use of tobacco is contrary to propriety, which is an eminent moral virtue. B. It is unbecoming to the high character of the priesthood and episcopacy. And C. It is detrimental to the health of the body. A. It is contrary to propriety. For, if the limit of true propriety is everything which can naturally have a bad effect on the senses or the imagination of noble persons and lead to what is disgusting, who cannot see that the use of tobacco exceeds this limit of propriety and brings to mind, instead, barbarous, vulgar, and disgusting habits, both to those beholding it and hearing of it, and to those who think about it? It is a revolting sight for someone to put in his mouth the stem either of a turned and filthy piece of horn or cob or dried-out wood, and from that fiery and smoking piece of wood to inhale puffs of hellish smoke through his throat, and exhaling it, to give off smoke like a burning furnace from the mouth and the nostrils, and like Diomedes' horses and Jason's bulls, to spew out smoke and sparks from the mouth and nose. Can there be found a filthier, more disgusting, or more detestable act than this?" Footnote by Constantine Cavarnos. These observations by St. Nikodemos perhaps appear medieval or monkish to many of those who wish to be modern and progressive. Let us see, therefore, what someone living in our time, who was not a monastic but a layman, and indeed the leader of a great nation, Mahatma Gandhi, says: "There is nothing becoming about blowing off smoke. It is a most dirty habit. Tobacco smokers' mouths emit a foul smell. Probably tobacco kills the finer feelings. Tobacco smokers become callous and careless of others' feelings. Non-smokers generally cannot bear the smell of tobacco smoke, but one often comes across people in the railway trains who just go on smoking, heedless of the feelings of their neighbors." Elsewhere, Gandhi again says, "I have always regarded the habit of smoking as barbarous, dirty, and harmful." St. Nikodemos continues, B. The use of tobacco is unbecoming to the high calling of the priesthood and the episcopacy. Since the bishop is a typos of God and an icon of Christ, all of his morals, then, must be Christ-like, pure, and occasion not scandal, but benefit to the people. But what purity is to be had in the indecent use of the filthiest of weeds? And of what benefit, rather what scandal, for Christians to see their bishop or priest holding a little drilled-out rod in his teeth, lighting a little bowl at the end of it, exhaling from his mouth and nose foul-smelling smoke, and his house filled with a thick, darkish cloud of loathsome fumes? Bishops and priests need to breathe in a spiritual savor through all of their senses, in such a way as to make fragrant all those who approach them, whether Christians or heathens, as St. Paul says, For we are unto God a sweet savor of Christ, in them that are saved, and in them that perish. But when they inhale and swallow the foul fumes of tobacco through their nose and mouth, which causes many who cannot endure this to pass out, how afterwards are they to be, in accord with their calling, sweet perfume and the savor of life to those who approach them? Footnote by Constantine Cavarnos. With regard to the relation between smoking and clergymen, among whom the canons include chanters, let us note the bad effect that smoke has on the voice. The good profits of reading the sacred texts and chanting depend to a great degree on their good execution, and their good execution depends, aside from other factors, reverence, contrition, etc., on a good voice. However, smoking leads to various afflictions and changes in the voice, with the result of reducing the range and intensity of the voice, diminishing endurance in chanting, altering the quality and nimbleness of the voice, and of occasionally causing a break in sound, the sudden interruption of the tune being sung. C. Finally, the excessive use of tobacco is detrimental even to the very health of the body. For this reason, many of those who continuously use tobacco are found after their death to have scorched internal organs. Footnote, i.e., blackened, damaged lungs. Indeed, there is hardly anyone among those who use this weed continually who does not thereby condemn himself. And all of the moral philosophers in common censure the frequent and public use of tobacco as vulgar and boorish. If indeed someone should claim that worldwide and common usage has made smoking a virtuous thing, we would respond that this same common usage has made many other acknowledged vices to be thought of as virtues, among which, indeed, is the would-be virtue of levity. Nonetheless, right reason and the law of Christ censure them as nothing less than vices, even if they are fostered by foolish and evil general usage. 2. That smoking is precluded for Christians. Many of the so-called non-mortal and mortal sins often so rule some people as to make them complete captives or slaves to these sins, or, one might say, slaves of the devil. With regard to such people, it is written, "For of whom a man is overcome, of the same he is brought into bondage," and "Whosoever committeth sin is the slave of sin." One person is ruled by coffee, another by snuff, another by pipe smoking, to the extent that they seem filled with bile and poison, and one cannot converse with them unless they have first drunk a cup of coffee or put a drilled-out piece of wood in their mouths or snuff in their noses. And these foolish people are unaware that everything which excites and captivates the senses is precluded for Christians, as St. Gregory the Theologian says, "Neither let us prostitute the sense of taste, nor pamper the sense of smell." Indeed, if they think it is noble and decorous to smoke a pipe and so on, let them hear how contemporary moral philosophers condemn them for this in their writings on ethics, saying, "What kind of nobility and decorousness is this for man, a rational and noble creature, to put a drilled-out piece of wood in his mouth filled with burning weeds, which is what a pipe is, or to blow out of his mouth and nose a black cloud of offensive smoke, like a furnace, thereby resembling a dragon, which is allegorically the devil, about whom God says to Job, 'Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron.' What kind of decorousness and nobility, I ask you, is this? I doubt that a more barbaric or disorderly habit than this can be found. How then can one any longer call these things small and venial sins on seeing that they rule over men equally with the great and deadly ones? And what differentiates, I ask you, those guilty of the aforementioned sins from those ruled over by the mortal sins of fornication, greed, jealousy, and the like? Certainly nothing, for all are equally held captive, all are slaves, all are conquered by the passions. And whether they be conquered by small or by great sins, like two lions, for example, caught in a trap, one by 4 legs, the other by 1, Both we consider equally trapped by death, and neither can escape. For this reason, St. Basil the Great writes that in the New Testament there is not a differentiation between great and minor sins, and that the rule of sin over man existed before Christ came, while, since Christ came and gave to men power over sin, it is not fitting that a Christian be ruled over by any form of sin.